So how do you learn the spin? So if you're starting out young, cold, with a cold call or a cold look, what do?
Call the program officer. Identify a program, and and pitch it, and it might be that they can be very helpful, saying, this is interesting, but it's not my area. You might try a different program within the same agency, even. Or they can teach you how to spin it. So they can say, well, this part of the program or the project is interesting to us, but this part wouldn't be. Or, with NSF, it's transformative. Everything has to be transformative. And so you learn whatever the buzzwords are. And I will tell you, at NSF, it's gotten enough that they have somebody reading the abstracts for your grant submissions now. And if it doesn't contain the words broader impact and intellectual merit, they will send it back to you. Now, you could talk about broad impacts, but if you don't use those words, it comes back. And so, just learning those types of things helps you, not miss out on a funding cycle, because you didn't have, despite the fact you addressed all those issues, the person they've hired to check whether it's in there can't tell unless those words are there that it's there. And these are just tricks that will help keep you in the game longer.
But I've been doing this a long time, and this is really scary to me. I'm going to call a program officer. Like, what if they don't like it? Then I'm done. Can you give us a little idea? That's one of the hardest things to do. Do you send an email first? Do you write a letter of intent, which is called an LOI? So what are the ways to sort of, what you want to study, and you've sort of identified an agency, but how do you, that's a scary thing to do.
Well, I'm not sure how to respond to that, but I think partly you got to know the audience even before you call. So, for example, the Fed's job is to answer those calls and help you.
So those program officers don't vote on your proposal, they don't grade it at all?
I'll chase you away, partly because the reality is there's only 3 social scientists at the Grant Foundation. Okay, and we try to put all our emphasis and our work in, once we get grants, and doing capacity building to develop the field further and those investigators and the people that are working with them. So we go to incredible lengths on our website to have the language, and everybody, I don't want to be cynical about it, but everybody does have a language and a spin, and that's very true. But every time we hear something and people are misinterpreting, we go change our website. We add frequently asked questions. So part of it is you got to know the audience, and if I gave you a little slideshow at the end, I tell you, go to the website, don't call us, send us an LOI, we respond to it in 4 to 6 weeks, but don't bother us because we're only 3 people. Now that's not true at the Feds. So you need to almost know the organization better, and a good place to start, is with their website.
So how can early career professionals, students, postdocs, prepare themselves to write successful grants and to be successful policy researchers? If you could, sort of from your years of experience, say what are the things you could do in graduate school or in postdocs? What kind of advice would you give? Because it's not part of our curriculum all the time.
I will say, one of the things I've been doing with my students with NSF is NSF is a dissertation improvement grant program. These are for limited funds. $12,000 is the cap, at least the programs that I deal with. But the funding rate of these proposals is much higher, but you go through the same, and the proposals are a little bit shorter, 10 pages as opposed to 15, but you have to go through all the same processes that you would if you were writing a full-blown grant. And at least in several of the programs, the hit rate is 50%. So it's much, much higher than you would for, but then now you've got a federal grant on your record. And by going for those, you actually are listed as a co-PI on that grant, because with the federal granting agencies, you can't be a PI. But at NSF, they have this exception that if you're a student, on a you can be a co-PI on one of these dissertation improvement grants. And I think working with a faculty member to put one in, especially one who has experience with grants, is a great way to go. I'm sure there are other agencies that have these types of programs, but to seek them out when you're starting out, and to think, I think small is what you said. One of the, another mistake is you see junior people going in and submitting for above the average award amount in a particular program. And remember, part of what they're evaluating when you submit is your track record and whether they think you can do what you say you're going to do. And when you're starting out, you don't have one really. And so I find more willing to take a risk with somebody who's proposing something smaller when they're starting out on their own than something big, because the risk is less. They've given you a small pot of money, and if you blow it, you blow it, as opposed to a big pot.
Yeah, so a couple other additions that are great. So like the dissertation grant, there's also National Research Scientist Award, I think they're called, NRSAs. They're pre-doctoral and post-doctoral versions of them.
Also known as the Ruth Kirstein Awards.
Oh, they changed the name.
They changed the name, so you have to.
I'm not correct.
You have to Google Ruth Kirstein, K-I-R-S-C-H-T.
And those are very prestigious. They show you've gone through the process, and they can be very helpful for initial funding. And some of these smaller things are really helpful for building sort of the preliminary work that you're going to want to put into a preliminary studies section in any grant. What they want to see not only is your track record for funding, but you have some early findings that show your idea might work, right? And so anything you can do to show you've done some initial work in this area, that you're finding some early things, you have an intervention you've tried on a very small sample, you've piloted and actually have some information about, that can actually give a lot of credence to your ideas and lend weight for the next grant.
And even if you don't have this yet, I'll give you a story of one of my former PhD students who just landed her first solo NSF grant. She had put in a grant proposal, and they wanted preliminary data, but she couldn't collect the data until she had some money, which is a bind we often find ourselves in. She took the reviews of her first proposal, where they said, we'd really like to see some pilot data. She took it to her research office at her university and said, here, they say they like the idea, but they want some preliminary data, which I need money to, and they gave her a summer salary and money to do it. It was a small amount of money, but again, also now she could put that on her CV, so when she's applying, her university had faith to give her money, and all this activity is building your record and showing what you can do.